All right. Y'all go ahead and I'll see if I can figure out where everybody else is.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so we're talking about domain 6, member and stakeholder engagement. Lauren, for you and I here, did you already answer these questions for the study guide examples, or will you be seeing them for the first time here as we go through them today?
This will be a review of them for me, but I would still appreciate the opportunity to go through.
Yeah. We'll go through each question. And before we get into the questions, I added a couple of slides about my own test taking tips, and I gave them all to Chrissy in a Word document to send out to everyone in the study group. So if they're helpful for you, you can have those in a Word doc, or I'm going to share my screen here, and I've got a couple of slides with info for you, especially when it comes to this domain. So let's talk and specifically about some member and stakeholder engagement tips. A couple of things to keep in mind. These were the key things that I tried to ask myself with each question. Is it best versus first? So you probably heard this one before. What is the question you're being asked? There's usually a block of text, and then it's what is the first thing you should do? Or what's the best or most efficient thing you can do? Best and first are two different things. So if you can literally in your mind highlight that word in each question, are they asking you what should you do first versus what's the best thing or the most important thing? Remember, those are different. And we'll talk about, I've got some other test taking tips for how to decide best versus first. When it comes to best answer, what's the best thing that you should do or what's the most important thing you should do? This second bullet point comes into play. What's the broadest, most accurate answer? When you read through the bullet points or the A, B, C, D, and you go, well, 2 of those are correct. 2 of them are obviously wrong, but 2 of them are correct. Does one of them contain the other one? So is it the broadest answer? The CAE exam is not an exam where out of your 4 options, only one of them is correct. That's not going to happen. Most of the time, 2 of them are obviously wrong. 2 of them could be correct, or 3 of them could be correct, or all 4 of them could be correct. But that's when you start to let your brain get into semantics and go, well, it could be this one or it could be this one. Try to stick with your gut and your feeling and think that through. Best versus first, broadest, most accurate answer. Yes, A is correct, but B also contains A. So B is the broader, more accurate answer. So try to keep that in mind. B to B, S to S, CSE to CEO. This is a kind of acronym to remember that board members should communicate to board members, staff should communicate to staff, and the CSE should communicate to the CEO or the board chair. So when you get questions about something happened, who should go talk to that other person to see what happened, or who should communicate this plan? Board communicates to board members, so the board president should be communicating with board of directors. Staff should communicate to staff, so the executive director or the CSE or directors or leaders of departments should communicate to staff. You shouldn't have board members giving direction or communicating to staff. That's crossing a line there. And then if there's an issue between the two and the board of directors, president or chair or CEO should be communicating directly with the CSE. So when you think about hierarchy of communication, board to board, staff to staff, CSE to CEO. Thoughts, questions on those couple of tips before we move on?
No, that's good. Those are great.
So a couple of acronyms, especially when you're thinking of first. So we talked about best, broadest answer, but when you're thinking of what should you do first, you've probably heard of SPY at this point. Scan, plan, implement, evaluate. This is the order of things. When something says, what should you do first? Or what should you do last? This is where you want to always go in this order. Scanning is taking everything in, information gathering, understanding what the problem actually is, what's already been done, taking everything in. Planning is just that, coming up with a plan, not taking action items yet, but just making a plan. Implementing is then actually carrying out that plan. And evaluate is the one to never forget. Always at the end of a plan, evaluate, how did it go, get feedback, iterate and make changes, but evaluate. Hey, Nicole, how are you?
I'm good. Apologies for my tardiness.
No worries. We haven't quite gotten to questions yet. I'm just going through some test taking tips that I have from my perspective.
Great.
So that's SPY, scan, plan, implement, evaluate, and that has to do with the order of things should be done. On the other side, LERP. LERP stands for legal, ethical, reasonable, and practical. So when you're thinking through those options that either says first or best or what should you do, is the answer legal, ethical, reasonable, and practical? If it doesn't meet any of those things, it's probably not a great answer. So again, that's kind of those two acronyms there. Questions, thoughts, are those helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. And then some last test taking tips, some things that ASAE loves. You'll see these recurring a lot in your study questions, and just thinking through like, which one is the best thing? ASAE loves the purpose and the mission of the association. The why behind it exists. It's the driver for programs and services. And should you offer this new program, well, does it help drive the purpose and the mission of the association? So you'll see a lot about that. Getting member input, surveying, focus groups, getting feedback. Always love getting member input. ASAE loves short-term and ad hoc volunteer opportunities. The quick one-offs really helps encourage engagement. If someone can promise to help with something and there is a clear start and end point and they know exactly what they need to do, you're more likely to get a larger pool of volunteers that actually show up and do what's expected of them. So you'll, ASAE leaning towards short-term and ad hoc volunteer opportunities. ASAE loves no budget. The questions aren't going to be about which one of these things should you do, and you need to take budget into consideration unless it specifically says there is a limited budget. The questions aren't going to say that. Unless it specifically says that, don't assume budget is a consideration. And that kind of leans into don't assume things that aren't said in the question. A lot of us want to read between the lines and make assumptions about the scenario that they're presenting. Try not to make assumptions. Don't try to read between the lines. Take exactly for face value the question that you're being asked or the scenario that you're being presented. Remember that the CSE, the action items that a CSE actually does themselves are generally reserved for emergencies. So who's going to implement that plan? It's not the CSE. It's the staffers, it's department leaders who are going to delegate that to coordinators and other staffers. So a lot of us aren't familiar with giant 100-person staff associations, and we're used to executive directors getting their hands dirty and doing implementation, but not at this level. ASAE loves for a CSE to be in that helicopter, the 50,000-foot view, and to reserve their action items for emergencies. And then remember, ASAE will always encourage putting members in a good light. So if there is an option that says bashing or calling out a member in a public setting, that's never it. That's never the answer. We always want to put members in a good light. Anything that you all have noticed so far that you want to add to this? Again, are these helpful so far? What do you think?
Yeah, they're very helpful to me.
Excellent. Okay, so let's dive into the questions. Lauren and Nicole, it's just you all here today, so we'll try to divvy up between the three of us reading the questions, but I'll have you all talk through the answers. And I've got some notes on why some questions are or aren't correct, but we'll just kind of talk it through out loud.
Oh, okay.
Either of you want to go first?
Sure, I will.
You want to read this question and then talk us through what you think the answer is and why?
Okay. The average membership in XYZ association lasts 5 years. In that time, a member will, on average, spend $150 in dues, $500 in conference registrations, and $200 in product purchases. They will also spend $75 every other year on a productivity and compensation study. What is the lifetime value of the member? Okay, now I got to get my quackulator out, I guess.
You will not have any real questions on the exam that actually need a calculator. Heads up.
Plus 500 plus.
I too used a calculator when confirming I knew the answer to this question.
Okay, well, I mean, me doing the math, the number that I'm getting is $1,000. Again, because I'm assuming that I'm not like multiplying my number by 5, I'm assuming that the phrase in that time, is the totality of what the member is spending in the 5 years. So I guess my number is $1,000, but maybe I double counted the $75 every other year productivity and compensation study. I assumed that would be like twice in a 5-year cycle. So my guess would be A, $925.
And Lauren, what did you get?
I actually went with C, the 4,400, because I think I know it says on average, and when I read the question, I was that's a very tricky wording of how it's phrased. But I really do think that because it's the lifetime value, I think that's usually it's like, how much are they spending per year? And if it's 5 years, then totaling that 150 plus 500 plus 200 times 5, and then an additional 75 every other year, gets to C, 4,400.
The correct answer is C, 4,400. You're spot on there, Lauren, that the key indicator, and Nicole, I know exactly why you thought that, right? It just says on average, this is what it is per year. The key indicator is lifetime value. You won't on the exam see it, but in practice, you may see this as LTV is the abbreviation for lifetime value. And lifetime value, it looks at the average of how long someone uses your product, your service, or is a member, and everything that they spend within that time period. So in this case, it would be 150 plus 500 plus 200 times 5 plus 75 for every other year, which would be 2 or 3 years. And so that 4,400 there would be the correct one. If this was your first time ever hearing the words lifetime value, how could you figure out this answer without knowing that that's what that meant? And my recommendation here is that as tricky as the study questions are, there are no trick questions on the ASAE exam. They aren't intending to trip you up or make you think, well, 3 of the answers start with a 4 and only one of them is a much smaller number. It could be the smaller number because they're trying to trick us. That's not what's happening. So you could reliably look at this and go, okay, 3 of the answers are pretty similar. That's probably where I need to be. Does that help you, Nicole?
Again, I guess I'm just getting tripped up by the phrase in that time.
Yeah, so it's in this time, the average membership that lasts 5 years. So in that time, in a 5-year period, they'll spend this. We know dues are annual. This is, again, I should have prefaced this. I don't know if you all have talked about this with some of the other domains. All of the study guide questions are rejected or not used test questions. They didn't make it into the exam for one reason or another. So study questions are not as clear as the real exam questions will be.
Okay.
This could be more clear where it would say, in that time, a member will on average spend $150 per year in dues.
Right. Yeah.
$500 per year in conference, like it would clarify.
Yeah, that's the part that's obviously tripping me up because I would assume that in that time means the 5 years that they're talking about from the previous sentence. Like,
100%.
yeah.
Because they specified this one is every other year, it is not clear, and the real exam won't be as unclear as
Okay,
that.
good. Because some of these, like in the last, whatever, several weeks, some of these study questions have really been like hurting me
Yes.
with the
study
readability and the
Yeah.
like, okay, am I stupid or like what is happening? Yeah, okay. All right, that's
I
fine.
found that the questions are clearer in the real exam, but
Okay.
the answers are more closely like, well, 2 of these are correct.
Okay.
And that's where some of those test taking tips for you to figure out, yes, multiple of them are correct, but which one is the best answer? So don't feel bad about study questions being a bit confusing or people interpreting them wrong. There's a whole committee of CAE test question reviewers that look at them before they go into the exam, and they have to be clear to multiple people, and they do a lot of test stuff with specific questions.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Question 2, Lauren, you want to take this one?
Sure. What areas are appropriate to include in a membership dashboard? A, recruitment and retention rate, B, market penetration, C, volunteer engagement, or D, all of the above. And kind of utilizing the tips that we were just going over, like which one is the broadest answer. I would go with D, all of the above. I will, in my practical answer, recruitment and retention rate is usually what I would just include rather than these market penetration and volunteer engagement, but I'm thinking that the test wants all of the above.
Nicole, what did you think?
I kind of had the same. I didn't feel strongly about volunteer engagement, but because I thought both A and B would apply, I would have defaulted to picking D on the test.
Both are great assumptions. Yes, D is the correct answer. If you get A and B and you're like, well, C is not a bad answer, then D is probably it. And Lauren, to your point, the broadest answer where all of the others are also good. Yes. Same thing. I could look at those and go, what's the most important to include in a membership dashboard? That's a different answer. But this isn't asking what's most important. So a lot of the test taking is really identifying, are any of those keywords in the question? Because if it said what's the most important, then I'd be with you, Lauren, that it's probably recruitment and retention, but it's not only asking for most important, but what areas are appropriate. And all of those areas would be appropriate to put in a membership dashboard. I'll read this question out and then have you both give the answers so we can round robin read them out loud. So number 3, an association starts the year with 333 member companies and a 33% market penetration rate. At the end of the year, the same association had 300 member companies and their market penetration rate increased. What's one possible explanation for this? So I'll let you all read through the answers, think through it, and then share how you got and why. And if it helps, and we can talk it out loud, which ones can you immediately discount?
A.
I'm sorry, Nicole, what did you say?
No, I said A.
Yeah, that I was going to agree that as well.
Is there another one that you can say that's not the best answer?
I'd probably also say B.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's a key difference between C and D that will help lead you to the right answer. Do either of you think you know what it is?
think it's the mergers and closings.
Is the correct
Or,
answer?
or the number of companies. Yeah, I think C is the correct answer. I think D, the overall number of companies in the industry, doesn't make sense, because the market penetration rate increased.
Mhm.
How I reasoned, that out.
Any different thought, Nicole?
No, I agreed. I mean, the way that D is phrased just again was like, it almost didn't make sense. Like the overall number of companies that belong to an association decreased. It just was like, I mean, that could happen, but that wouldn't explain what's happening.
That's
So
exactly right. Yeah.
that was like, okay, like,
Yeah.
yeah, all right. Like just a random sentence. Like
It's
got
a
it.
random sentence that makes sense, but is not relevant. That's 100% correct.
Yeah.
This, which belong to an association makes it totally irrelevant to the question up here. If it had said the overall numbers of companies in the industry decreased, then yeah, your market penetration rate could go up because the total number of companies, but it has nothing to do with whether they belong to an association. That doesn't impact those numbers here. So even again, if you had no idea what market penetration, like how to figure this out, you could reliably get rid of A and B. And then just thinking through these two things, like this just doesn't make sense as an option for this, and lead you to C. So yes, C is the correct answer. Nicole, you want to take this one?
You got it. What is a membership model? Good question. Forecasting membership growth over some period, the names associated with different engagement opportunities, the price points associated with different membership offerings, or how an association packages and prices access to benefits and services. Ooh, okay. So again, I don't think it's A or B. So I'm narrowing it down between C and D. And I think it's more about the membership itself. So not necessarily the price point with the membership offerings. Like that reads to me like things you could get once you have a membership. So my answer would be D, how they package and price the access to benefits and services based. Again, I'm filling in the blanks here, even though you said not to do that. Access to benefits and services, I would say the back half of that sentence should be depending on which level of membership you would choose. So I would pick D.
Excellent. Lauren, any differing opinion?
No, I'm in agreement with D, because I feel like that, it's about, that to me was the broadest answer, for this question, and it's encompassing benefits and services, not just price points, associated with the different offerings.
Yeah. In this test question, it's a sample question, not a real one, but I think they're trying to throw you off with the word model. Model can mean graph or report. And so I think the test question is trying to throw someone off there, but you all are right. The answer is D. And the broadest answer, test taking tip is applicable here, that B and C are both really a part of D. If you think about the names for engagement opportunities and price points with membership offerings, well, those two things together build out association packages and prices for benefits and services. Engagement opportunities are benefits and services. Pricing is built right in here. So membership model is the holistic view of all of that together, which is D. Lauren, you want to take this one?
Sure. As a new chief staff executive, you have initiated a review of your organization's, membership model. What would be a logical first step in assessing the model's alignment with the mission and vision of the organization? A, survey the membership. B, field a focus group at the next annual conference. C, add this question to the next board meeting agenda. Or D, review existing documentation from when the model was created. This is one where I feel like 3 answers are also correct. I don't think field a focus group at the next annual conference. It seems too far down the line and not something you would do as a first step. Adding the question to the next board meeting agenda, I think that is something that would come after A or D. I initially was thinking survey the membership would be the correct answer, but I think that review existing documentation from the model was created is the one they're looking for.
Lauren, your thoughts? Anything different?
No, I mean, I agree. It feels like review is almost always the first step. I mean, in life and in this test, the paradigm of this test. Again, I'm kind of personally doing a lot of this with our own records internally. So you definitely have to kind of start with where you've been before you can decide where you want to go next. So my answer would be D too.
D is the correct answer. Thinking back to that test taking tip, spy, scan, plan, implement, evaluate. Scan is always the first step. Surveying the membership, fielding a focus group could be a part of scanning or planning, because you're actually taking action, you're doing something to come up with a plan. But reviewing the existing documentation is the best first step before you survey the membership, because you are a new chief staff executive. So what if a survey had been done a month or 2 ago? What if this had just been done? You don't want to resurvey the membership. You want to gather information about when was it last reviewed? When was it created? What is, gather information. And then the next step might be to survey our focus group in that scan phase.
With also, in that question, like the fact that it had review in the question and then review as a word in the answer, is that something also that they do sometimes?
The fact that it matches exactly, not necessarily, but synonyms, yes.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to first, you can often look at the verb of the answer to say survey, field a focus group, add this question. Some of those are actions and some of them are, well, I guess they're all technically actions or verbs, but you get it. Some of them are like do something involving someone else and some of it is just information gathering. So the verbs are definitely a key indicator in the question. When conducting, this is number 6, when conducting stakeholder mapping, the elements representing the X and Y axis are traditionally A, influence and reach, B, buying ability and awareness, C, power and interest, D, longevity and impact. I'll let you all talk it out. Is there anything that you immediately discount? And what would lead you to the right answer here, even if you have no idea what stakeholder mapping would involve?
I mean, I would discount influence and reach, just because those two things seem like the same thing to me. So those wouldn't necessarily be like opposite axes. And then kind of same for B, like buying ability, like not every association or stakeholder group has to care about someone's buying ability. So I would probably cross out A and B right away and then try to decide between C and D. And I'm leaning towards power and interest as my answer.
I see you nodding, Lauren. C is the correct answer. And I think your thought process there was spot on. Just even if you've never heard of the content, because the CAE exam is not a content exam, there isn't any perfect amount of content for you to go memorize these things. It's just about using your test taking tips to rule out answers and choose between the best. So I did the same thing. I got it down to C and D. And D, you know, impact and longevity, sure, those are important for stakeholder, but I think power and interest are better. If I was looking at who are my stakeholders, how am I going to figure this out? Power and interest are just better indicators than longevity and impact. Nicole, back to you for number 7.
Oh my, okay. This is one of the best ones here, where all the answers are the same, just in a different order. Okay, the engagement continuum outlines a possible hierarchy of engagement, serving as a framework for resetting the concept around member engagement. Oh my gosh, that sounds like gobbledygook. That says engagement too many times. The engagement continuum outlines a possible hierarchy of engagement, serving as a framework for resetting the concept of member engagement. Okay, what is the proper sequencing of the items in the continuum? Creating, serving, governing, consuming, promoting. Consuming, creating, governing, promoting, serving, consuming, promoting, creating, serving, governing, or governing, serving, creating, promoting, consuming. A hierarchy of engagement. Okay, so in terms of engagement as a hierarchy, I would definitely want to put consuming as the bottom of that hierarchy. Again, knowing nothing. So I would eliminate A and D right off the bat, because I think consuming, like as a member, just feels like the lowest thing you could possibly be doing is just taking in what the association is doing. So consuming. And then in terms of what I would see as next, again, just between the two options, I would again lean toward, hey, what's a lower level thing to do? Promote something or create something? And it feels like promoting is a lower level thing to do than create. So I would pick C as my answer.
Lauren, any differing thought there?
No, I'm in agreement with Nicole. I think I got to it a little differently, because I was like looking like governing is probably the last thing that you're doing. Consuming is the first thing. So that's where I got to see. And then I just like read through like promoting, creating service, like, oh yes, that makes sense.
100%, and this is a fantastic example. C is the correct answer. This is a great example of an ASAE test question where I've never heard of the engagement continuum, the hierarchy of engagement serving as a frame. What?
Yeah.
What matters is the last sentence in the prompt. What is the proper sequencing for the items in the continuum? I understand what all of those words mean individually within an association space.
Yeah.
And thinking to the test tips, it's perfectly in the SPY. What do you do first? What is the sequence? Scan, plan, implement, evaluate. When you look at those verbs, consuming, promoting, creating, serving, governing follows the scan, plan, implement, evaluate life cycle of actions. We want to consume information. We want to take it in. We want to scan and understand what the need is. We want to promote it. We want to get feedback from people. We want to make sure we've got proof of concept. If we put out this new product or service, are you all as members going to want it? Are you interested? Let's get buy-in from stakeholders. Then create the action. Okay, now we're going to create the program or the service. Now we're going to implement it with serving, and then we're going to govern it. We're going to get feedback. We're going to iterate. We are actually going to carry out and implement the process or the change of whatever that we're doing. Great job on that one, talking through it. It can definitely trip you up to get in your own head about which of these comes first. And when you can, just think back to any of the test taking tips and try to not let yourself get way too in the weeds on like talking yourself out of things. Lauren, I think it's your turn.
Great. True or false, an association should identify and consider the needs of internal stakeholders and current members and prospects. I think the answer is true.
Yeah, the answer is true. No trick questions, assuming you're reading all of the words in the question. If you're reading really fast and you miss a key word, yes, that can that can throw you off, but ASAE is not going to try to do the double negative style questions where you get all caught up in tricking you. If it makes sense, it is what it is.
I just have the only thing that would trip me up in this question is the word prospects. Again, maybe it's just I'm too much in my own wheelhouse, but it's just not something that we typically consider. Maybe we're not doing that right, but we just don't, in terms of prospects, that would be so low on the totem pole of identifying and considering the needs of when we're doing things, I guess. So, again, I'm just as a point of conversation, I guess, I'm just curious as to how much ASAE thinks that prospects are something we're supposed to be concerned about. Like, I don't know. It just feels like there's two different buckets of people. And in terms of where I should be focusing my energies, it would be on my internal stakeholders and my current members, and prospects would be somewhere else. And that part might, again, in a vacuum, might lead me to pick false on this question because of prospects.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. That's great discussion. Lauren, do you have any thoughts before I give mine?
Yeah, my thought is prospects are kind of like your membership pipeline. Like who are people there that are not a member of your association yet, but could be. And you as an association want to be cognizant and identify like what those needs are. And they might be the same as your current members, but they could also be just a little bit to the left or something. The thing in this question that actually almost tripped me up was the internal stakeholders. I think in my current job, we have just such a much more, we don't really care about the toll it takes on staff. It's more about the membership and prospects. So.
And internal stakeholders could be board, could be volunteers, more than staff, but it's kind of more specific than just members. Could be non-members if you have like related government entities that are interested, or if an association also has other nonprofits as stakeholders that aren't prospects and aren't current members, but are invested stakeholders, if you will. So that could be internal stakeholders. And I would say ASAE puts a lot of weight on prospects as stakeholders. So you'll definitely see more of that and hear more of that even in other domains, but a lot in this domain as well when you talk about who are the stakeholders. And Lauren, you were spot on that it's your member pipeline. And so there is this whole bubble of potential members out there that you aren't currently serving. They aren't members. Why? Is it because of an awareness issue? Is it because they need programs or benefits that the association is lacking? And when you think, drawing back to that, I'll flip all the way back here, drawing back to this slide, ASAE loves the purpose and mission of the association. So if those prospects are a part of your key industry, what is it that you're not offering them that is part of the purpose and mission of the association? Is it a particular education course? Is it a particular certification? What is it that can help you grow the association while furthering your purpose and mission? So ASAE will put a lot of weight on prospects. To your point, Nicole, if this said, who is the most important stakeholder, internal stakeholders, current members, prospects, I don't think prospects would be number one.
Okay.
But it is still, they hold a weight with ASAE.
Yeah, Lauren's example makes sense. I'm just in a really unique association where we don't, we just don't care about prospects that much. So thank you.
Yeah. I always recommend, if you can, because I really struggled. I was at a local, so when I took the CAE, I was at a local association. We served just our little bubble, and it was a number of members. And I struggled a lot to be like, well, that's not how we do it.
Yeah.
And so my test taking tip is to invent an association, like in your head, make it all up, use your imagination, and try to use them who do it perfectly every single time, and have 100 staff. And you run through a scenario, like getting out of your own day-to-day job and thinking of your imaginary association. Is it on? I think it's on me. So number 9, identifying stakeholder needs can be best done by examining engagement data through periodic surveys and focus groups, in conversation with like-minded organizations, through a year-round effort that incorporates numerous inputs, both quantitative and qualitative. So you all talk it out. What can you eliminate? What test-taking tips would you use to figure this out?
To me, this is one of, I default to like, what's the broadest answer here? A, B, and C all seem to me to be encompassed into D. So that's why, and D is talking about a year-round effort, and I feel like anything that indicates this is a ongoing process is probably what the test would like to see.
Nicole, any other thoughts?
No, I agreed with that. I mean, I would eliminating, I'd get down to B and D, and then same, I would just say that the better answer is to be doing it year round rather than periodically. So I agree.
That's correct. D is the correct answer here. And that's exactly it. It's the best, most broadest answer. All 4 of these go, yeah, that's not wrong, but one of them is the best answer of all of them. I think we're back to Nicole.
Righty. An association needs to fill moderator and room greeter spots for its upcoming annual conference. Who should the chief staff executive suggest to increase engagement? Who should we suggest to increase engagement? Ad hoc volunteers, association staff, board members, or conference committee members? Okay, this one's tough for me. The only one it feels like I feel confident eliminating is association staff. Staff doing that is not particularly engaging to the members. And I'm leaning towards eliminating ad hoc volunteers. Again, I don't know that that's maybe the best answer. So I'm really torn between C and D. This would kind of be a coin flip for me. I mean, in terms of impactful, board members would be really great, but maybe that's like the pie in the sky answer and the conference committee members. Again, this is one of these things that my own experience really trips me up, because I run a conference and my conference committee members are the ones that help me do everything. So they would definitely be the moderator and room greeter spot. So I would probably default to conference committee members, even though like a part of me wants to say board members too. So I would say D.
Okay. Lauren, what do you think?
I would actually go with A, ad hoc volunteers, because it's increasing the number of volunteer opportunities. And it is a small way to get more volunteers involved. And I know that going back to our tips, VSAE likes small volunteer opportunities to get people involved. So that's why I would go with A, ad hoc volunteers.
A is the correct answer. And so we'll talk through why and how did we get here. ASAE, like you said, Lauren, one of the things that they love is small scale, identified ad hoc volunteer opportunities to get more people to involve. ASAE loves the idea that every association has processes, procedures, and documentation for everything. So if you think about board members, if you are a board member, that entails a very specific list of duties that you as a board member do for that role. Conference committee members, same thing. There is a very specific role that you are going to serve as being the conference committee member, planning, implementing, hosting it. Ad hoc volunteers, this is the perfect opportunity where board members and conference committee members could also be a ad hoc volunteer, but you are defining the role. We specifically need moderator and room greeter spots for an upcoming conference. So we have a defined role for a volunteer opportunity that has a start and an end time and very specific requirements for this role. So it's a very easy call to action to get more engagement without having to tack on roles and list of requirements for existing volunteer roles. We're used to small scale where, yeah, we're just going to use our conference committee members. They're going to be the ones that are going to greet at the door, and board members have the biggest impact. So we're going to ask that of our board members, but putting on our 100-person staff, really big association, we want more opportunities with defined short-term impact for the volunteer to be able to step up. Thoughts or questions on how I came to that conclusion?
No, that makes sense. I guess again, I have to kind of rewire my brain in terms of what engagement means. Because I'm always thinking about that as like, we're doing X to increase future engagement, I guess is like the formula I'm always using, not like, hey, the ad hoc volunteers in and of itself increases engagement in this very moment, example, whatever. So I have to just kind of remind myself to take it a step back. Like not thinking about what would be in the future increasing engagement, but what action increases engagement more, like the verb tense. I just have to kind of, again, mentally think that you're, like you're saying with what AACE is trying to drive at.
Yeah, exactly. I think you were spot on also with immediately discounting association staff. If we're talking about increasing engagement, going back to the test tip of B2B, S to S, CSE to CEO, board to board, staff to staff, CSE to CEO, your staff members talking to other members is good. It's not a bad thing. But if we're wanting to increase engagement and ask for volunteers, member to member or that board to board, their concept is great of like other members should ask other members and talk and greet and be the moderators, putting the members in a good light. All of those kind of test tips added together all apply here.
Thanks.
Yeah. Number 11, Lauren.
An association's chief staff executive has noticed a substantial decrease in volunteers to fill crucial roles. Which of the following is the best way to increase volunteer recruitment? A, recruit from the pool of previous volunteers. B, offer more short-term volunteer opportunities. C, send a blast email to all members asking for volunteers. D, ask the board members to personally recruit potential volunteers. I'm just going to go from kind of this to me seems like a very similar answer to just the last one, just the last question that we did. So I think it's B, offer more short-term volunteer opportunities, although all the other answers are things that I have done in terms of practical volunteer recruitment.
Nicole, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree just because I'm not crazy about the other ones. I mean, I've tried, again, personally, I've tried send the blast email, doesn't really work. Ask the board members. I mean, that's not a bad idea, but it's just like, it's like, it's not the best. So again, it's more like picking the best of these worst options, and B feels like the best of the bunch.
Yeah. Talking through, you all are correct. B is the correct answer, and talking through a little bit more in detail, especially for the recording, for those taking this at home. Again, reread the last sentence of the scenario. Which of the following is the best way to increase volunteer recruitment? A, it's not wrong, but you're not increasing volunteer recruitment. In fact, it's staying the same. If you're only asking people who have volunteered before to volunteer again, you're not getting more volunteers. You're pulling from the same pool. So it's not wrong, but it's not the best. Send an e-blast to all members asking for volunteers. Not wrong. Yes, that could increase volunteer recruitment, but it's not the best answer here. Asking board members to personally recruit potential volunteers. That is a great way when a member is asking a member, a board to board, thinking back to that member to member and being personally invited is a great way to increase volunteer recruitment. But in ASAE's mind, it's still not the best. That would get you a few, you know, that would get you some volunteers. But in ASAE's experience and opinion, having short-term volunteer opportunities where you can send out that call to action with an email blast and with board members personally inviting, saying, hey, I need your help for this very specific thing in this date range, and these are the goals. Can you help me? You're more likely to get a yes than an open-ended, do you want to serve on a committee?
Yeah.
Well, how much, how often, what do I like? You're not going to get. So again, for posterity and the recording, B, that's kind of the thought process behind all of those. C and D are good answers, but B is the best. Back to me. Number 12, which of the following is an effective tool for keeping volunteers engaged in their volunteer roles? A, detailed volunteer work plans. B, long-term volunteer appointments. C, frequent recognition of volunteer efforts. D, frequent evaluations of volunteer performance. So again, you all talk it out.
So to me, when I'm thinking about a tool to keep volunteers engaged, work plans, appointments, evaluations can all be steps, but I really think it's the recognition that the, receiving recognition of what they've done is what keeps people, I think, more engaged in the actual role. So that's why C is the answer for me. Not necessarily using any of the tips right now, but that's the one that just seems the best answer to me.
Any differing thoughts, Nicole?
No, I agree. I mostly read through it as like what would keep me engaged if I was volunteering somewhere, and the only one that felt right was recognition. So I agree.
Yeah, C is the correct answer. Thinking back to the test tips, ASAE loves to put members in a good light. And so being able to recognize them calls this out. I think if this were a real exam question, it would say which of the following is the most effective tool? Because an effective tool is not a great differentiator between these, because a detailed work plan sure is effective because they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing or not doing. But keeping them engaged is the key there. Like you all said, with a work plan is not going to keep someone engaged. It's going to let them know what they should be doing. Long-term volunteer appointments and frequent evaluations are not going to keep someone engaged, but that recognition, yes, just makes the most sense here. Back to Nicole for number 13.
Alrighty. Which of the following situations would most likely be covered by an association's ethics policy? A member makes a negative social media post about another member. A certification candidate appeals their failing test result. A board member fails to disclose their membership in another organization. A member requests ADA accommodations for an upcoming conference. So again, the two things that feel like I can eliminate them right away are a certification candidate appealing their failing test results. I don't know how that's really ethics. Same for a member requests an ADA accommodation for a conference. I don't know how that's ethics. So then I'm leaving A and C as my choices, and I don't know that the ethics policy would address social media posts between members. So I think more likely ethics covers when a board member fails to disclose their membership in another organization. But again, maybe that's me reading too much into another organization, because board members can belong to other organizations, but I'm assuming in this answer, what they're trying to say is like a conflicting organization or something of that nature. So with that asterisk and caveat in mind, I would pick C.
What about you, Lauren?
I wasn't sure. I like Nicole's answer, because a conflicts of interest would be covered in C, which kind of relates to an ethics policy, but I also know of other ethics policies or codes of conduct that have about member to member interaction. So I mean, I'm between A and C. I don't think it's B or D. But I would go with, I think, C.
The correct answer for ASAE was A, the negative.
Oh, boo.
I know. So close. You can always get it down to 2. The key references that this kind of conversation is discussed in chapter 36 of the 4th edition of the book. So if you've got the teal blue book, chapter 36, they'll talk a lot about ethics policy, where if it's a credentialing association, there may be an ethics policy that discusses that you must be allowed to appeal. And so that may be the case there, or you must be allowed to request ADA accommodations, and those might be built into the ethics policy, especially when it's a credentialing association. When you think about, if you haven't yet, when you become CAE or during your application, you have to agree to the ethics policy of ASAE. And so like reading through that, I think, is a great example of some things that could be in an ethics policy. I think failing to disclose their membership in another organization could be in a ethics policy, although that's more likely in a terms or an application policy, where when you are applying to become a member, you have to disclose certain things. The ethics policy is more less tangible, I think, in this scenario, where they're looking at like, I don't have an example of how someone would word it in their ethics policy, but treating members well and not putting members in a bad light, maybe something that would be more ethics policy focused. So my advice for anyone who's like, I don't know much about ethics policies, I haven't seen a ton of examples, is to read ASAE's CAE ethics policy to get an example of some things. And then you can always go back and read that chapter. Again, it's chapter 36 in the 4th edition PPAM. Any other discussion or thoughts from you all? I lost track again. Is it your turn, Lauren? Whose turn are we on?
I can take it. Which of the following is the best way to ensure members are aware of the association's code of ethics policy? A, provide a session at each annual conference that reviews the policy. B, place the policy in a prominent place on the association's website. C, dedicate space in the association's newsletter to highlight the policy. Or D, incorporate the policy review into the yearly renewal process. This is, for this question, I'm kind of borrowing from experience, and I think B, incorporating the policy review into the yearly renewal process is the best way. All the other ways are good, but I think having it incorporated into an annual renewal process creates a clear action on the part of the member, so that you can say that they're aware of the code of ethics policy.
100%. D is the correct answer. Don't overthink this. You're 100% correct. An annual conference is only going to get the attendees that actually go to that session. The website, sure, it should be there, but unless you're driving people to view that, how are they going to find it? The newsletter, sure, but that's one blip in a long newsletter of other highlights, but putting it into the renewal process on the website, that's also encompassed here, is the best way to ensure that they're aware. So again, that keyword in the question is the best way, spot on. Number 15, a staff member reports to the chief staff executive that a member has violated the anti-harassment portion of the association's code of conduct. Which of the following should the CSE do first? Report the violation to the board chair, interview the member to gain their perspective on the incident, review the association's policies to determine next steps, suspend the member from all activities until the investigation is complete. What do you all think, and what test tips would you use?
I mean, this feels like one of those clear cases of spy or spee or whatever. So again, that keyword is first and feels always like review. Review is always first. So that's what I would lean towards. See.
Lauren, anything different?
I think Nicole's right. I will say, when I was reviewing this, I had gone with B, interview the member to gain their perspective, purely from the fact because I felt like I had seen another question and that was the correct answer, is that we were talking to the member first. But I agree with Nicole. I think it's C, reviewing the policies to determine next steps, is the absolute first thing that you would do.
Yep, C is correct. There is a policy in place to be followed. The very first thing we should do is reference it to take our actions. Interviewing the member is not a bad scan step in the SPY acronym, but it is not the very first thing that you would do.
For that one, like what part of SPY would that step follow it? Would that be like implement or?
The interview?
Uh-huh.
Yes, I think that's one that kind of spans between, it could be scan, it could be implement because you're following an existing policy. Most of the questions will be, what is the first thing? You're not going to get a like, what's the third thing you should do kind of question. So the most important one is the scan, and then within scan, what is the first thing you should do? The SPY acronym really helps for like that other question where we had things all just in different orders of a general, like, what is an overview of a process, look like? Scan, plan, implement, evaluate. But the nuances of, okay, this is an action item, so should it be implement or should it be scanning? Don't stress too much about needing to know that. It's more so the first within the scanning is really the thing that's most important. I think this is back to Nicole.
Alrighty. The membership department is requesting budget allocation to purchase a new email marketing system. The finance department just purchased a new email system last year to send email messages to vendors. What is the first thing the chief staff executive should do when considering this request? Assess how well this system conforms to internal control policies, including PCI and GDPR. Assess how this technology aligns with the association's strategic plan and fits customer needs. C, ask membership department to use the same system as the finance department. There should not be a need to have two of the same systems in one organization. Or D, develop a formal implementation plan for the system implementation and communicate clear timelines to stakeholders. Okay, so C and D feel like the two I can eliminate right away. Again, C, it's one of those answers that just feels like it's there to just be contrarian. Like, we should never have two systems in one organization. Like, okay, that's a little much. So I'm going to cross off C. And then D feels like we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're considering the request. And when we're considering a request, we don't immediately jump to developing a formal implementation plan. So I'm crossing that off. And then even A feels like we're going a little too far ahead, like assessing how well this system conforms with the policies feels like maybe step 2 after step B, which is assess how it would align with our plan and fits our needs. So B would be my answer.
100% correct. You walked it all the way through exactly of walking it backwards. B is the correct answer. That is the very first thing that you would do in all of these actions. Yes. Anything to add, Lauren, that you had? Okay. I know we are coming up on time, but we've got the second set of questions, so we'll move a little bit faster through these to just kind of talk about the answer and the why. These are from the 2020 study guide, and I think at the very beginning, I can't remember if we were recording yet or not. My caveat with the 2020 study guide, if you all have or have not yet discussed this, is that they are all thrown out questions or questions that were not used in testing. No study guide questions that you'll use or practice questions were ever a part of a recent exam. They're either really old or they were questions that were thrown out. And particularly the 2020 study guide, it wasn't around very long before they had an updated version, updated the questions. So in my opinion, some of these are very good and some of them are great examples of questions that would be thrown out during the so keep that in mind. I think all throughout practice exams, I solidly got between 40 and 80% correct on all of the practice exams that I did. Not great. Didn't do good on most of them. Remember, you are practicing on the worst of the questions. It's going to set you up better for the real exam.
I mean, I just want to say thank you so much for that, because I don't know that that was clear with a lot of our other presenters. So that's encouraging, because there were definitely some as we've gone through this in this past several weeks that have felt like, okay, like,
Yeah.
should I maybe sit out because it's not feeling too good. So thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was hoping to take a full practice exam before I sit in May. So that's good for me to keep in mind. I appreciate that.
Yes. When you take the practice questions, do it from the perspective of I'm testing my test taking tips. I am practicing test taking. Don't stress about it too much for the content.
Okay.
The questions will be much more well worded in the exam. They've gone through a series of reviews and tweaks and perfection, and there's a whole committee devoted to writing and evaluating the questions before they go to the exam. So there won't be as much gray area. These are designed and pulled out to help invoke conversation and discussion around it. So don't feel too bad when you're only getting like 50% on your practice exams. And you're like, yeah, I could have guessed 50-50 between those two and I guessed wrong.
Okay.
So like I said, I know we've just got a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to go really quickly through these. Number 1, which of the following is the most essential element of a membership retention program? The correct answer is A, ensuring members are engaged. When you read through these, you're looking at most essential, creating a rollover renewal process, developing a detailed plan, and sending the annual report. Sure, those could help with retention, but the most essential element would be to actually make sure they're engaged. Number 2, which of the following is the most effective membership retention communication? The correct answer here is B, a message reinforcing what's in it for the member. Yes, having identified due structure and how much cost, that's good to tell members, and listing benefits that's related to their profession, and telling them the education opportunities and networking events are all important. But at the end of the day, it's the personalized, what's in it for you. What is it that they care about? It's the hook that's going to get them. Any thought, Nicole or Lauren, here on this one?
Just that B seems to kind of encompass all the other A, C, and D there too.
Yeah.
Number 3, membership organizations today are customizing communications to fit the needs of their members. What is the key to mass communication? The correct answer here is D, identifying key membership segments, their problems, and what can be done. You'll see a lot in ASAE that talks about using contracted resources to contract it out when you can. That's a common thing that you see throughout questions of use a contractor, hire someone to do this, because again, budget is not the concern. And that could be a great tool to mass communication, but it's not the key. If you haven't identified your segments and what can be done to solve them, then a contracted resource isn't going to be able to help communicate that message if you haven't first identified those. Careful editing to use mail merges. Yeah, that's a great key to mass customization, to tell people and to personalize it. But unless you've identified those segments, the problems, and how to solve them, your information in a mail merge isn't going to be helpful unless you have that first. So, and then the first one is just too vague. I think it's not the key to the thing, but identifying, that's going to be your best, most encompassing answer there. You are the CSE of XYZ Association. During the next board of directors meeting, the board is evaluating several programs and services to determine if they should be discontinued, revised, or kept as they are. What set of criteria should be considered during the evaluation? This one, I'll actually let you all talk out. I think this is a good one to kind of read through and review.
Defaulting to B.
Yeah.
Because again, feelings seems like the obvious one to eliminate. The membership needs assessment survey results, attendance records, again, just feels like the past 2 years. I mean, if you think about, hey, if I'm conducting this in 2023, the past 2 years pandemic era wouldn't necessarily give me a good sense of whether or not these programs should be discontinued, revised, or kept. So I would go with B.
B is the correct answer. Go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was just going to agree, especially because it talks about purpose and it talks about mission. Those other things are probably all stuff that you're going to be compiling. But B is, I think, the right answer.
Mm-hmm. You were spot on, Nicole. C and D that talk about the past 2 years. That's great for informational knowledge, but it doesn't address today's needs. Pandemic or not, the needs of associations can change, and looking at the future landscape and is what we're doing best for everyone that's going on. And so that's good data to have and reference, but it shouldn't be the set of criteria to determine what should we discontinue, revise, or keep. Purpose and mission of the organization, going back to ASAE loves, is it driving our purpose forward? And cost and revenues are here, and that's why I kind of wanted to pause, because just because something references the cost doesn't mean you should throw out the answer, because although budget should never be a consideration for implementing a tool or a plan when talking about ASAE's questions, but it should still be, shouldn't be like costly program, right? You don't want it to lose money. So is there a cost and revenue? Is it a revenue generator? Is still something you would consider, but the actual cost of something being less expensive than another isn't a deciding factor. Great discussion there. I think we're right at time. There's one question. So I think you all have an online community for the study group, right? You've got a segment in VSAEs. So maybe you all can discuss the other questions that we aren't going to quite get to. But I wanted to talk about, is it this one? Yeah, number 11. So number 10 and number 11, I didn't love these questions. These are ones that I think are great examples of things that would probably be thrown out. Number 11 here, if you all answered this, your website got hacked, all of your members' information was stolen, a member received a spam and is now accusing the association of selling. What should you do to prevent this in the future? And the correct answer here is to establish a policy to not provide email addresses online, in print, or over the phone. This question was written pre-pandemic in 2020, and maybe that was the best answer then. I would strong disagree that it is not the correct answer today in 2024. My personal thought would be that the best answer would be either C or D, to
Yeah.
publish it for members only and make it be a part of your terms that you're not going to spam, or to ask members and let them opt in. And I would lean towards C as the correct answer. So I just wanted to throw that one out there as you all are taking study exams. You're like, why did they come to this answer? I don't think it's relevant anymore. And I don't think a question like that with that type of content answer is going to be part of the exam. So don't let that one stress you out. Chrissy, I know we are now a couple of minutes over, but anything you need to wrap up with?
No, I think we're good.
Good luck, Lauren and Nicole. If I can help you all with anything, feel free to email, or anyone watching the recording. If anyone has any questions or wants advice, or just a person to talk through, please feel free to email me. And I shared with Chrissy those test tips in the beginning that were on the slides. I sent her a Word document of those. So if they're helpful for anyone to just keep on the side as you're studying and try to commit some of those to memory, use those if they're helpful.
Thank you so much, Meg. Really, really appreciate talking through and all the tips and everything.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Good luck on the exam. And like I said, feel free to contact me if you all have any questions or need any advice or anything.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
You too. Bye.
Okay.